Steve Erceg will outclass Ode Osbourne.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the Astro Boy, Steve Erceg.
I know that at some point I have to go from competing with the best guys in the world to beating the best guys in the world. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure I will and can do that. As far as mental, as far as training, I'm trying to making adjustments everywhere I can. I really do think I can be a world champion.
Ode, the Jamaican sensation, Osbourne.
Man, I'm just as blessed as Max Holloway, man. Living the dream. 12-year-old me, boy coming from Kingston, Jamaica, a small village, to being in the UFC. I never would have thought that this would have been a possibility.
Steve vs. Ode are set for the co-main event of UFC Vegas this weekend. And although Steve is on a 3-fight losing streak, I'm here to tell you he's not only going to beat Ode, but he's going to finish him as well. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA. I make opinionative MMA content. And if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. Also, if you guys are enjoying the videos and want to support the channel, be sure to hit that join button for members only live streams, videos, alongside with other perks as well. But anyways, let's get into it. When Erceg originally joined the UFC, he had a really quick run to the title, as he only got 3 total UFC wins before getting that title shot, and his quote-unquote best win was a second-round knockout versus Matt Schnell. And going into that fight versus Pantoja, a lot of fans thought Erceg wouldn't be able to survive, as Pantoja at that point was perceived to be the best fighter at the flyweight division, and when you look at Steve Erceg, as I said before, his best win was against Matt Schnell, so a lot of fans thought he wouldn't be ready. But in the fight, Steve surprised essentially everybody, as he was not only able to compete with at that point the best flyweight in the world, but he was even able to dominate in certain positions, and he was even able to win a couple of rounds. And in the end, yes, Erceg did lose via a very close decision, but if he made a couple changes, especially in that 5th round, we could easily be talking about Steve Erceg being the champion of the flyweight division. And when you look at what Pantoja has been able to do ever since that Erceg fight, it almost makes that loss for Erceg look even better now than it even originally did at the time. But unfortunately, after that Pantoja loss, things didn't really get better for Steve, as he ended up losing to Kai Kara-France via a 1st-round TKO, and in his most recent fight, he lost to Brandon Moreno in a not-so-close decision loss. So although it hasn't been a long career, at the same time, it has been a relatively up-and-down career for Steve Erceg, as he is currently on a 3-fight losing streak. And based upon that, Steve's next fight was a pretty significant step down, as he is fighting Ode Osbourne. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Steve Erceg will outclass Ode Osbourne? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first and main factor I want to touch upon is Erceg's striking ability. Because when you watch Erceg strike out there, even in some of his losses, he's always been a very effective striker. Steve is a very technical and cerebral striker out there. He does a really good job at knowing what shots to throw at what specific moments. And I think in a lot of his fights, even in some of his losses, we have seen a lot of success in the striking for Steve Erceg. What he does really well on the feet is utilize range, and really has a great understanding of his range as well. Because when you look at Steve for the flyweight division, he is pretty tall and he is pretty long. So he's going to be able to fight at a range where he's able to hit his opponents, but most of his opponents won't be able to hit him. And when Steve's able to find his range on his opponents, that's really where he goes to work. As at range, he does a great job at throwing jabs, right straights, hooks, stance switches, leg kicks, body kicks, even elbows when his opponents get in close. There's so many different weapons that Steve Erceg can go to on the feet, and in my opinion, that's a huge reason for why he's been such an effective striker thus far. Steve is just a very intelligent and a very technical striker out there, so against most opponents, I think he would have the advantage on the feet. And in terms of this specific matchup against Ode Osbourne, I think he'll have the advantage again. Yes, Ode is very fast and explosive, and of course he could be dangerous, but at the end of the day, I think the technical striking ability of Erceg is a step above of where Ode Osbourne is at this point. The next reason for why I think Steve is going to dominate Ode is due to his wrestling. Now, for the most part, Steve is not really looking to offensively wrestle. Outside of his fight against Costa, we really haven't seen it all that much. But going into this fight versus Ode Osbourne, I do believe Steve will have a pretty decent edge in terms of the wrestling. And if Steve wanted to mix it up, or even if he was getting tagged up on the feet, he would have another option to go to potentially slow down and potentially dominate the fight. So I do think in this specific matchup versus Ode, the wrestling actually could be a big factor. But the last reason for why I think Steve is going to dominate Ode is due to his distance management. Because I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but the best strikers out there have great distance management. When you look at prime Conor McGregor, he was known for his distance management. And when you look at Steve, yes, he does have all the other abilities. He is a very technical striker, great kicks, great jab, great right hand, great elbows, hooks. There's so many different things he can do, but really what puts everything together for Steve is his distance management. And I think in this fight versus Ode Osbourne, it's going to be even more important than normal. As when you talk about the striking style of Ode, it is pretty good at times. He's very explosive, very fast, as well as hitting really hard for the flyweight division. But the thing about Ode is he's not necessarily the most technical guy. So I think the distance management utilized by Steve Erceg in this fight could be huge. And I think if Steve's able to fight at a range where he's able to hit Ode, but Ode's not able to hit him, I don't really think Ode's going to be able to make adjustments. Yes, Ode is very fast and he does catch guys at times by surprising them essentially, but in this fight versus Steve, I don't really think we're going to be seeing that. I think we're going to be seeing two guys that have pretty good striking out there, but one guy in Steve Erceg that has significantly better and more technical striking than his opponent in Ode Osbourne. But if I had to give an official prediction for this matchup, I would lean with Steve Erceg via a second round TKO. I think in the first round, Steve is going to do a really good job at finding his distance and finding his pace. Where in round one, he'll utilize a lot of jabs, a lot of leg kicks, and essentially start to figure out the puzzle that is Ode Osbourne. But once it gets to the second round, I think Steve is going to have his reads, and I think at that point, he's really going to start to pull away. He'll be able to pressure Ode Osbourne, push him alongside the cage, land a bunch of jabs, right hands, hooks, elbows, knees, leg kicks. There's a bunch of different weapons that Steve can go to, and I think once we get to that second round, he's really going to start to pile things on, and in that second round, he's eventually going to be able to find one big shot that puts Ode down, and from there, I think he'll be able to find a finish. Now, of course, as I said multiple times in this video, Ode is a very dangerous fighter. He's very explosive and hits pretty hard, so that is something to worry about for Steve, especially a guy who was knocked out not too long ago by KKF. But in my opinion, based upon all the factors that I mentioned in this video, I just personally think Steve Erceg is a step above of where Ode Osbourne is at this point, really in every aspect of MMA, both on the feet and especially on the ground. But assuming Steve is able to get a victory over Ode in this fight, I do believe he still has a pretty bright future. Yes, I know he did go on a 3-fight losing streak, and he did lose a bunch of fights against the best of the flyweight division, but I think when you talk about the actual skill that Steve has at this point, it is very good, and obviously he still is relatively young and only making improvements after the experience of losing to some of the best. So I still do think that if Steve is able to win against Ode Osbourne here, maybe he can pile up a couple wins, move back into the top half of the flyweight rankings, and maybe even contend for a belt in the long-term future. You never know what can happen. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this specific fight between Steve Erceg and Ode Osbourne, alongside with what happens with Steve in his long-term future, where he's able to go from here, and if he's ever able to become a legitimate contender again at the flyweight division. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Steve Erceg has a real chance to be a star or a future contender once again at the flyweight division, or do you not think so? And also, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think he has a chance, or do you think he will beat Ode Osbourne in this specific fight, especially by finish, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until the next time, peace out, guys.